Hi there, it's Mike Madge. I'm back with Sailjuice.com, and I get to share the stage here tonight with two fellow Canadians, two special Canadians. I got Andy Roy and Terry Neilson with me. These two gentlemen are coming up on celebrating their 40th anniversary of being 1-2 at the Laser Worlds in Sardinia, an accomplishment that has lasted a long time and has never even come close to Canadians coming close again. So welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, before we delve into the past, let's talk about the future, because you're not has-beens here. I mean, Terry, we got some special congratulations for you having just recently been inducted into Canada's Sailing Sports Hall of Fame. And it wasn't just based obviously on your Laser World. You have a fairly strong sailing resume, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Sure. It was a nice event, the Sailing Hall of Fame. It was a real honor to be inducted, and it was great to see a bunch of people there. But I haven't been as active as Andy has. Andy's going to Laser Masters every year and all kinds of regattas. I took a rest after the America's Cup, and haven't got in 87, 88, haven't got back into it a whole lot, but it's never too late.
I thought I did see you. You were at an event in Fiji a couple of years ago, weren't you?
I was, yeah. It was a bit of a holiday. I went there with a friend of ours, Andy and I. His name's Rob Maru, and yeah, it was a nice little regatta in the middle of the Pacific. That's true.
Nice, nice. And Andy, you are just recently back from a very prestigious event, I believe, in California. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, the San Diego Yacht Club hosts an event every year. They actually host two back-to-back events. One's many sailors have probably heard about the Lipton Cup, and then they follow that with the International Masters Regatta for the obviously the older timers like myself. And it's they put on two amazing back-to-back events with evenly matched J105s. You rotate boats after each race. Great shoreside events, social parties too, and but tight competitive racing, and really we've been there 3 times now with a bunch of guys from Toronto, good friends, and we had a second to Dave Perry the first year, which was good, and then we went back in 2019 and managed to win it, which was great, and then this year we didn't quite sail as well, and we ended up 7th with some good races, but it was a tougher competition this year. We didn't quite get where we wanted to, but that was all right. It was great. It was great being there. Yeah.
Super. So maybe just to get us started in your lead up, let's just start off. Maybe Andy, we got you on there now. When did you first get into lasers? Who got you into lasers? Who was kind of your mentor or somebody you really looked up to?
Well, I think, funny you should say mentor, and just talking about the event I was at, the International Masters Regatta, the guy who won it last week was from Seattle named Carl Buchan. Many sailors have heard of him. He's just a legend, genius sailor, and his father, Bill Buchan, who won gold medal at the same Olympics Terry won his bronze at in the Finn, and his father won in the gold, and his son Carl won the gold in the Flying Dutchman at the '84 Olympics in LA. So Carl Buchan was an early idol, if you will, and John Bertrand, of course, also from California. And it just was the thing to do. And Dave Perry, of course, he talks about this a lot. When the laser came out, if you're a young guy, 15, 16, 17 at the time, and you were sailing in your club and maybe in 420s or albacores or something, whoosh, it was just the thing to do. You just had to do it. You got one, and it was absolutely a fantastic time. And even though the class, of course, lives on and very strong now and incredible competition, there's no way the guys now racing had as much fun as we did racing in our time. Right, Terry?
I agree. Yeah.
So,
a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I want to go back to Andy for a minute. I remember you talking about it at the Canadian Masters, where you started off on actually a really small lake, and
I started off in a man-made lake in downtown Ottawa. Everybody's been in Ottawa. It's called Dow's Lake. It's part of a canal. It opens up. It's mainly for canoes and paddle boats. And there was a Canadian Forces sailing club there with some 420s. And my brother and I, because my father was a sailor out in Nova Scotia, for some reason, my brother and I just wanted to race sailboats. We just got the bug and started there, and then graduated to a bigger bay in the west part of Ottawa. And then I'd heard about all these guys like Terry sailing competitively in Toronto. And let's graduate to there, and started sailing out of Lake Ontario, either in Toronto or Kingston. And just went up from there and started to hit the road doing regattas. Each got a van and traveled around. It was the funnest time of our lives, no doubt.
All right, so maybe Terry, maybe you could give us some insight into how you got started in the boat, mentors, who helped you along.
Sure. You know what helped me a lot was before the laser, sailing albacore in some of the youth championships, the 13 and under, and then the 16 under in Ontario. And we had a really good sailing association. A lot of people would go to the regattas. And then, as Andy said, at the time, the laser came along and everybody jumped in it. And, you know, basically a lot of the time in the beginning, I was training by myself. And then I ran into a couple other guys for the first time in Lake Ontario who were good laser sailors. And we just started training. And, you know, we started going to regatta after regatta after regatta. As Andy mentioned, we had a lot of fun. And we were, I think, very fortunate that at that time, I got to say the best sailors in the world were in the laser. And in North America, it was the top fleet, I think, in the world. So you go to an event like a U.S. Nationals, you got 200 boats, and everybody was the cream of the crop. So you just got better by sailing among those people. And it's just a lot of repetition, regatta training. And, you know, we just, as far as mentors, I would have to say it was always the people that were winning the regattas at the time. You know, whether it was Carl Buchan or Cam Lewis, or, you know, usually top Americans that we would, you know, eventually be able to compete with.
Now, a question I have for both of you is, I mean, nowadays, with all the resources young sailors have, they go on the internet, there's courses, there's coaches, you know, that there's so many things that help them along the way to get better. At the time with you guys, obviously that wasn't available. So what were was it more experimental, trial and error, trying things out, getting better, seeing what the guys winning were doing? How did that work?
You go ahead.
Take a Terry or?
Sure. So you know what? There's a huge difference between when we were sailing, I think, in the late 70s and early 80s and today, in that we had, I would say, organizers that would say, okay, here's where the regatta is. We'll help you with your airplane tickets, and here's where you do your laundry or something. But that was about it. There was minimal coaching on the water, especially from a technical standpoint. So we had to figure it out ourselves. And a lot of it was hike harder. We would try different things, and, oh, gee, you know, pull the out haul in, that's faster, or let it out, that's faster. And it was just trial and error. So we really had to learn a lot of it on our own. And I think also we had to figure out traveling logistics on our own. And I think compared to today, you know, maybe some of the kids wouldn't agree, but it's you know, it's much, I think, easier today because somebody tells you what to do every hour of the day. When we were doing it, it was like, well, what do we do now? You know, you had to figure out your way to get through Europe, North America, and it was a challenge.
Yeah, I think Terry brings up a really good point. And I almost wish some of our young sailors today would do more. What we'll talk about it some more in the meeting, but two boat training. That's what Terry and I did, and Larry and Terry and the Finn. And we self-coached. We would line up and we'd go as fast as we could, try to burn off the other guy as hard as you could. If one guy started to edge out on the other guy, we'd, you know, get a boat length lead, 2 boat lengths, definitely going faster. We'd stop and we'd talk about it. Hey, what are you doing? And we'd try to figure it out ourselves, what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah, and a lot of it was, sorry to interrupt, Andy, a lot of it was intensity. And then if one guy kept going ahead, we go, okay, switch boats, jump in each other's boat. And sure enough, you know, there was a faster boat. So it, you know, and it was just a lot of changes like that. But it was with 2 people, it's very easy to isolate what the differences are. When you know, a lot of the training now is 5, 6 boats, and you know, you get a lot of wind shifts on that. As far as I think for training around a course, it's better. But as far as just pure boat speed and intensity, it's hard to beat a 2-boat training cycle.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And I would think like with figuring out yourself, it gives you a more intuitive feel for the boat than people that just open a book and say, okay, at 5 to 7 knots, set my out haul here, Cunningham here.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it give you a more intuitive sense for the boat?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you'd have to feel the balance of the boat, the trim, being overpowered, underpowered. You wouldn't rely on a guy a boat length behind you in a rib with a video camera, which they do now, and actually at regattas and racing too. I don't think there were any coach boats on the water. Very, very few ever, which was a great thing. It was just, and you had to figure it out yourself. You had to measure the current yourself. You had to stand up in your boat and look at the sky and the shifts and take readings, and you do your own pre-race analysis, post-race analysis on developing a game plan, right there.
Yeah, no, I agree, Andy. And a lot of it was just time in the boat. I think you got to go to the gym, you got to go get your cardio up and all that. But Andy and I, when we were training, I hear the training sessions are now, they go out for 2-3 hours. Well, we would have 3 hours in before lunch, come in, have lunch, and go for another 3 hours. I mean, we were training 6 hours a day for months at a time. And I think that when you talk about intuitiveness, we could just tell by feel what was going on. You could, you knew how fast you're going, if you're pointing, without even thinking about it. It's automatic. And, I jump in a boat now, it's a joke. I have to look at the telltales. I don't have a clue what's going on. But, back then you could feel it.
There's no doubt when Terry and I were doing our training in Australia pre-Worlds, as he just said, we started off, there's no doubt so where we were training was such a perfect place. It was light winds every morning out of the east, south of Fremantle, south of Perth. And it was in a bay, a big sound. So we had light air in the mornings, and then come in for lunch. There was hardly any wind at lunch. And then a sea breeze came in, and we could sail in either chop or big waves in the afternoon. So we could have all conditions almost every day. And there's no doubt when we started off, I was a little faster than Terry in lighter wind, and he was faster than me in heavy wind. And we worked and we equalized that. I got better in the heavy, he got faster in the light, just by working together and sharing. Why do you think you're going better there? And we talk about it. I can remember that clearly, right, Terry? Just
No, it was I mean, we knew we were competitive, but we shared knowledge the whole time and talked about it, switch boats. But
that's right.
We were competitive and intense. I mean, each one of us wanted to go faster than the other guy, no doubt about it.
For bragging rights.
Now, I wanted to, Andy, I know you're still heavily involved in the laser class, and I know we have talked a little bit about this, how it's changed, but is one of the feelings with the new control lines and that, I mean, back when you guys were sailing, was it a little bit more about pointing the boat? Was everybody kind of more interested in pointing, and today's sailors with the heavy bangs that they can put on and put the bow down and just go?
Yeah, we couldn't do that. We couldn't put the bow down because we didn't have the purchase to get the vang on that tight, and plus the boom couldn't even withstand it because there was, I think it was pre-sleeve. Is that right, Terry?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so we had to sail in more of a pinching mode upwind, I think. Call it that. I mean, not pinching, but you know what I mean? We had to sail a higher line. We couldn't go bow down because we just couldn't get the vang on hard enough to do that. Yeah.
And it was difficult. I mean, now it's so nice having your, whatever it is, 16-1 of the vang or something. I mean, back then when we had the old vang, before the start, you put all your weight on the boom and take up the vang. Then you got to try to uncleat the thing and only let out 1 inch at the weather mark. And then at the next bottom mark, after the triangle, you'd have to, again, go around the mark and put all your weight on the boom without trying to capsize or go ahead to win. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Now,
you don't see that now.
So now there was the laser book, a pretty famous book that's been out. I mean, I don't know how many editions there's been, but I think it was you, Terry, I was reading about where where around did they finally discover, like, hey, by letting the vang off, like the boat became much faster downwind and the S curving? When did that really become predominant?
You know, it was after I moved on to the fin. Maybe some people figured it out when I was still sailing, but I certainly didn't figure it out. But I think it was more, Andy would know better than I did because he's been sailing the laser more consistent. But when I went back into the laser for the odd laser masters regatta, I couldn't believe how loose the vang was downwind.
Yeah.
And it was so much faster.
Yeah. Now we did S turn, but we didn't have the as loose a vang. And we weren't as good as turning as the guys now, and as radical or as bigger turns. We had figured that out, yeah, but the vang, yeah, for sure.
And
because there was a fear of letting the vang off too much, especially on breeze, and you couldn't get it back on once you crack that thing, unless you have to head back up, head to wind, and put a little vang on and bear back off. So. Right.
That's right.
So different now with the nice vang. Yeah.
And I remember you also talking, Andy, about how it was different where you sailed with much looser hiking straps back then.
That's one thing I'm surprised we didn't figure out through all our training. Why we never tried to, hey, let's try with a tight strap, because it doesn't seem right, because you think you want to get it more outboard, but there's no doubt, because one thing it does in the laser, if a little tighter strap, it forces you to move back in the cockpit a bit, to get a little bit of looseness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And being back in the cockpit a little bit when there's waves, it's proven to be much better than forward. Yeah.
And I think back then everybody was doing the same thing in regards. I mean, part of it could be we were wearing weight jackets back then. Everybody wore, I don't know how much, Andy. I think it was. What was the maximum? Was it 10 kilos or something?
It was half the fin. What were you, 44? It was 10 or 11 kilos.
Yeah, the fin was crazy. It was 20 kilos. But in the laser it was about 10 kilos. So, after your boots and your tiny wetsuit, you could wear 10 pounds of bottle on your shoulders. And so that made a difference. So I think we tended to have our strap looser, have our legs straight, and we wouldn't hike out as straight with our, our body. Our abs wouldn't be straight out like they are today.
Right.
So both of you participated in the 1980 Worlds in.
Yes, a very infamous regatta. It was fantastic. It was 3 weeks, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And 351 entries from all over the world. And we rotated boats after a race, similar to what I was just describing. And you came to the pier at the Olympic Harbor in Kingston along dock, and there was a guy waiting to get your sail number. And the only thing you could jump on the boat with, if you wanted to, was a compass on a plate, snap onto your deck. Otherwise, it's the identical tiller, Cunningham lines, everything, main sheet. So it was an amazing event. And I'll steal a little thunder from Terry. Well, the story is, Terry probably won't want to mention it, but he had the regatta looking really good going into the last race. Just had to have a nice race, and he was going to have it. And it was a famous or infamous Kingston Northerly, which is renowned for its big shifts and then a hole out of nowhere and a puff from the other side of the course out of nowhere. And it didn't turn out so great for Terry or me in that race. Not that I was in contention to win, but so I think part of it going to 82 and training hard to prepare for 82 was a little bit unfinished business, especially for Terry.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
I would agree. But I gotta interrupt for 1 second here, guys. My screen is messed up.
Yeah, I think you sent us some photos here, Andy. Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I sharing my whole screen right now?
Yeah, but that's all right. Why don't you pull up some of those photos?
Sorry, that's why I did.
Yeah,
Sorry.
pull them up, and
Yeah.
we'll take a look at those photos there.
Okay. So it's a little weird here. I haven't done this before. How am I doing here? Oh, good. I guess I gotta. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. No worries.
Well, here's I'll bring up the first one. There's a little. I don't know if you can see that. All right. It's,
Are you
I-
getting that? You getting that, Terry?
No, I've got kind of Andy's screen in front of me.
oh dear. Okay, so this might not work, then bringing up these photos.
That's all right. I got one here I could bring up.
How
I
about
got
that one there? Do you see that?
No, we're not getting it.
Oh, wow, okay,
But I got one here.
all right.
So this is I think celebratory ness after the Worlds.
Us. Do I need to send the screen back to you?
I think do you see that,
Stop
Terry,
share.
on
I
the
do.
screen?
No, oh, I see it now. Yeah, I got a lot more hair back then.
What about you, Andy?
This is confusing, this screen sharing. I'm trying to, there we go. So that was right after we got the 1-2 and
Terry,
is
Terry, you're looking at that like, what do I do with this? I think Andy's showing you what to do here.
I think so. I think
Yeah,
so.
and you won the event.
That's right.
Yeah,
but
that's a pretty cool picture.
yeah, there's too bad I can't bring some more of these up because some good ones. But where we're standing there is just a good side story to talk about how we wouldn't trade the era we sailed in compared to the guys today, because it's of course incredibly competitive. Guys are on serious fitness regimens. Back then, so that where we're standing is a club called the Tam Tam Club on the beach in Sardinia. And we had a party midway through the regatta. The Canadians organized it, called the Shades, Shorts, and Chapeau Party. And everybody showed up. I mean, the guys who were in the top 10 at the time were all there. And there was a few beverages, of course, going around. So that just wouldn't happen at a Laser Worlds now.
No, I don't think so. Some of them aren't old enough to drink.
Well, that's
Speaking
true.
of which, how old were you guys back then?
24?
Yeah, 23, 24. Yeah.
Okay, so you're old enough to drink then back then. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
that's good. Just checking on that. I want to talk to you a little bit about your training going up into that world. So you took both of you took a hiatus to Australia. Now, for why Australia? What was the thinking there?
Well, we had been to the Laser Worlds in '79 at the same location. And we had met a family there, got to be very good friends with them, and they lived right on the beach. And actually like they became really close friends, really. And I asked them, I said, what do you think if we came over? And they knew Terry as well, and lived with you and trained. And they had 2 old lasers that were in decent shape, but they weren't, new. And they said, great. So they were so nice to let us stay there, and we kept the boats on the beach overnight. There was no dollies back then. We'd even, I remember, we'd grab them by the traveler and drag them into the water. We wouldn't even carry them in because they were just old beach boats, but they were equal old beach boats.
Yeah.
And we'd each have a buoy with an anchor, a marker with an anchor in our cockpit. We'd sail out in the morning and set a course. And then we'd come in for lunch, as Terry said, and Leslie, the lady of the household, she would make us a great lunch. And we go back out in the heavy breeze in the afternoon, and then debrief together after. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what's your recollection of it, Terry? What was a day like in Australia? What did it?
Every day was a good day. It was sunny most of the time. I mean, Western Australia, you get the sea breeze coming in, as Andy mentioned earlier, about noon or so in the morning. There was a lighter breeze, and it was the perfect place to sail. There was a local gym we could go lift weights. We did a little bit of running, but mostly it was time on the water. And it was, it was a lot different back then. It was a small community. I've heard it's quite more populated now, but it was about the best spot I've ever trained in my life.
So let's move on to the Worlds. What do you remember about the Worlds? What I read about it. Oh, there's a good picture.
You
There's,
see that one?
yeah,
Okay, we
yeah.
got one.
There's the non-dolly approach.
Yeah, so that's us in Australia during our I think it was a regatta down on the to south of Perth.
Okay.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's Terry in, well, shorts, boots, and a life jacket.
That's
That
right.
was-
But Andy, I guess we were wearing weight jackets then, were we?
yeah, we did. I'll bring up another one now that I think I guess I have it working. Tell me if you get this one, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's in Sardinia in the Worlds. That's Terry at the top. You can see he's wearing a bottle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
bottled,
yeah.
weight jacket. I'm wearing a little half soaker weight jacket. You can just barely see it here.
But interesting enough, like you're now, I don't know how tall the difference is, but there's a fair height difference, isn't Terry? Aren't you quite a bit taller than Andy?
Maybe a few inches. I mean, back then I've shrunk now, but back then I was about 6'4". Probably.
Yeah, so he's got 4 inches at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
4 inches is a lot of poundage on the leverage.
Could be.
This is an example of, again, another example of how we had fun at regattas back then. This is at the Sardinia Worlds. A bunch of guys in the middle of the night or late at night decide to prop all the boats up like you see here with the top sections. Everybody came down in the morning, saw about like 50 lasers propped up like this. And I mentioned the party. Here's one more. The shorts, shades, and chapeau. There's Terry on the right at the, during the party.
Look at the girl looking at you. She's like what is that? That's a nice Canadian chapeau for
That's
sure.
right.
Bob and Doug.
Yeah. So getting back to the Worlds here, when you went there, what do you think it was? I mean, I know you had done a lot of training. I understand the event was more of a light shift event, and there was top-notch competition. I was looking at the results. I seen Russell Coots, his name was in there. I'm sure, like I think it was the largest attend laser at the time in terms of nations that were involved.
Yeah, I think it was like 28 nations at that Worlds, and I don't know how many entries, in the mid 200s, I think, and split down to a final goal fleet of 80, I think it was. Yeah.
What do you remember?
It
Sorry?
was my recollection was we had light air, medium, heavy. I think we had a bit of everything, you know.
Yeah.
It was, but why? Because Andy and I hadn't sailed a whole lot after Australia. I think it was my idea, which is probably a pretty stupid one. We went to Denmark to sail with some laser sailors there, like in March. We just about froze to death, and probably not the smartest thing. But anyway, then we got to Sardinia. We started sailing, and I remember like a couple days before the regatta, there was people going upwind, and like 8 or 9 boats or 10 boats going up, and we were just faster. And it was like, what's going on here? And I think it was the first time it hit me that all that training had really had done something, because it was a bit choppy, and especially in the 8 to 9 knots, you had to work the boat through the waves, and it was like, wow, it was like something's different here. Like we were just faster. And I think once the regatta started, the funniest thing was, and I'm sure Andy, you can remember this, is we'd be going upwind, and it was like 6 out of the top, sometimes 10 boats on the windward leg, first or second windward leg, we're all Canadians, all of our buddies. And it was just like bizarre. We were like having a conversation going upwind, like sitting at a bar or something.
Well, I remember the first race I came 12th. I wasn't a great race. But I wasn't a bad race. That's a counter at a World Championships.
Yeah.
And I remember across the finish line, I was, and I came back to get the 12th because I was deeper earlier. And I remember feeling, it's pretty good. But all my friends were luffing there because they had crossed the finish line. And I was kind of bummed out because all my friends beat me. There was Terry, Steve Fleckenstein, Al Clark, Greg Towers-Turner, et cetera, et cetera. So the Canadians, we really had it go in that regard. I don't know. Like Terry said, we just had so much confidence in our boat handling and our balance in the boat and how to work through the waves just from boat time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the Worlds, I mean, both of you were involved in America's Cup. We're lucky enough to have Glenn Ashby on here, our last show, and he talked about with the America's Cup boat that they have today, even as big as it is and foiling, he still brings the sensation of sailing his A-Cat to that boat. He still has some seat of the pants sailing to the boat. Now, if I recall correctly, on that America's Cup boat, there was a whole lot of laser sailors on that boat. And I'm trying to think, like, how much of the laser sailing technique instincts did you bring to sailing that 12 meter?
You know, I think depends on the position of the boat. I mean, certainly the laser helped me for steering, but I think I was completely out of place on a boat that was 65 feet long and probably weighed 50,000 pounds. It was, you know, very, very different. I think that the teamwork and the crew work. So I would have to say the laser sailing for me helped as far as wind shifts. You know, let Andy comment on it, but not that I could look at wind shifts. I was steering, but it was a very, very different animal from my standpoint.
It was a different animal. Yeah. Yeah. But I think just the subtleties you learn in laser sailing of every move. If you move one way or the other, it could be either good or bad. In other words, so positioning and trimming the sails in 12 meter was so important, and the speed on the radar. So it just instilled upon you having the boat perfectly trimmed at all times was critical.
And I think for me, it was a very, you know, I felt out of my element. It was many people. There was, you know, administration. And I think as Andy just mentioned, sales, everything was very technical that I didn't have much of a clue what was going on as far as the mast and sails and some of the boat design. And frankly, I like the laser a lot better than big boats. It was just too much of too many variables in my opinion. So I have a lot of respect for the people who win in that, but it's a very different game.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on too was, so after the laser, Terry, went into the fin and were very successful in that. Well, what sort of adjustments did you have to make going from the laser to the fin? Did you find it an easy transition, or?
I found it, you know, it's kind of like a lot of people, and Andy might relate to this also, is that you jump into a new boat and it seems for the first 6 months, you can do no wrong. You do well. And then after 6 months, you start overthinking it and start doing worse. So I went through that cycle. I had to gain about, you know, probably 20 pounds of going to the gym. I had to be able to, you know, carry a weight jacket that was, you know, 30 pounds instead of 10 pounds. So it was a hard boat to sail physically, but as far as, you know, starting upwind, downwind, it was not that different than a laser as far as the basics, but it was just physically a bit more demanding, I found.
Yeah, I had to make a decision whether I was going to try it too, and because that was the natural move after our 82 Worlds, and then I did 83 Worlds in laser too, and I came 6th there. So okay, do I want to go in the fin? But Terry and Larry were doing it, and I wanted to do it, but I just felt I had to put on too much weight. Yeah. Just couldn't see myself doing that.
Yeah.
So my Olympics became a Pan Am Games in '83, a mini Olympics, if you will, as the Pan Am Games are. But kudos to, of course, to Terry for going to LA and capturing the bronze. It was awesome.
So I listened, Terry, I listened to your speech there or actually Larry's speech when he was introducing it for the awards there for induction into the Canadian Sailing Hall of Fame. And one of the key attributes he attributed to you was your toughness. And would both of you agree that that's one of the key attributes, no matter how much skill you have? I mean, the laser, fin, those boats really, you have to draw deep on those, I would think.
Yeah, I would have to say I'm not suggesting the fin was harder. Both the laser and the fin are, I find, very physical boats, and you better be in shape. And I think you got to be able to and Andy has this capability, obviously, or he wouldn't have done so well to block out the pain and just grin and bear it, because it's you got to hike like a maniac or you're not going to win.
Yeah. And then, like I mentioned him earlier, the guy who took that, I think, to an even higher level was Hank Lammons, of course, who played in the NHL, was just a beast, and he could just shut out the pain, and it took him to winning two Gold Cups. Larry, is that right? Yeah,
2 Finn Gold Cups.
2 Finn Gold Cups, and had a gold medal almost virtually in the bag, and he apparently could block out pain and just hike harder than anybody else. So, yeah.
Now, I'm wondering, I was going to say, with your kids, but I guess we're all at an age where we're talking grandkids now. The road to the America's Cup, a young person that wants to get on the road to America's Cup, something like you guys did. Like back then, it was kind of laser dominated. A lot of laser sailors made their mark. Ed Baird, a lot of the guys made their mark coming from the laser. I'm just wondering, with the higher performance boiling boats now that we're seeing in the America's Cup, do you think kids got to get into a higher performance boat earlier, or what's your thoughts on that?
Go, Terry.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, just what, I'm so out of touch with these foiling boats. All I can say is, from my standpoint, I had so much fun in dinghies compared to the bigger boats. I had fun in the bigger boats, but the dinghies were just, you just got to enjoy yourself, and while you're younger and fit to be able to do it. And I would say that enjoy it while you can. I'm not so sure the best and the dream is going to be an America's Cup boat, because one, it's tough to get there, and two, once you're there, it's a job. I mean, it's not a sport anymore. So it's more of a profession. If you want to go as a profession for sailing the rest of your life, and then it's not a sport. So I think Andy and I were very lucky that we got to sail laser and other boats while we were young, and it was a sport as opposed to a profession.
Yeah, I worry about the foiling trend a bit. I mean, it's great for blasting around, but to see racing going that way, I'm not convinced it's a good way to go. It's going to be expensive for kids. It's obviously more expensive than say just a laser, or even like a 29er or whatever. So I don't. I'm not a big fan of the foiling and taking over in racing. It's sure to have some of it going on is great. I don't want to see too many junior clubs try to switch over to foiling wasps or whatever, because that'll be a pricey, and I think kids will lose that contact with the water and the waves a bit too.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful that we don't sound like just a bunch of old people that don't like change. Like we accuse our parents and grandparents of doing. Here we are, but I think that what I think we always had fun on is going upwind, and you got wind shifts, and you got the best person. It wasn't who went the fastest, although fast was good. It was who could play the shifts the best, and who could play the odds the best against the fleet. And I think that if you're just foiling the whole time, or it's you lose that part of the sport. So I agree with Andy.
So I'm going to leave you with one last question. What's it going to take to get Canadians back on the podium at the Worlds? What would be your advice to some of these younger guys with aspirations of doing what you two gentlemen did almost 40 years ago?
I'm going to let Andy answer that one. I'm out of touch.
That's a really good question, Mike. It's going to take somebody who's got, I hate to say, has got some money, because he's got to spend time in Europe, because the big fleets there, the big training groups are there. But I think he can do a lot. He or she, I shouldn't just say he, of course. Well, we got Sarah on the she side. We've got Sarah Douglas,
that's right. Yeah,
doing just a fabulous job, and she's got a great coach in Vaughn Harrison. But I think back to what Terry and I talked about earlier, I'd love to see guys doing what we did, and still having a coach, of course, but not out there every day. Just work together, self-coach, get two boat train harder and harder, but then split off and go to regatta, check in how your speed's doing. That's basically what we did. But it's going to be a challenge, because it's tough in North America. We don't have the regatta. You gotta spend time in Europe
But you also agree, I know, Andy, you're probably familiar with the Road to Gold series that Andy puts on, and him and Hamish,
Yes,
Hamish Wilcox. And
Right.
one of the things they say is sometimes kids are almost getting too regatta orientated, like, and going to regattas and not having their boxes all ticked off where they can go and give themselves a chance to be successful. So do you agree with that?
Terry, you want to?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the concept of, I think regattas are important, but I think the reason Andy and I were successful in the laser is we took the time away from races. We didn't go to a race for what, Andy, like 2.5, 3 months?
Yeah,
We
and
just-
and we loved it. We loved. I never got, when we did our 3 months, 4 months of training in Australia. I never got bored. I never
Yeah.
said, "Geez, I'm bored with this."
Yeah.
Because I wanted to get up the next day and work harder and try to beat Terry in the training, and he
Yeah.
wanted to do the same with me.
Yeah, so we got along, we were lucky, we were friends, and we trained hard, and we had a nice place to sail. And I think that it's more fun to go to regattas, way more fun. But if you just go to regatta around half the day, you're not training, it's not a controlled environment, you're not doing 2-boat speed testing. So yeah, I agree with the statement that you can do just regatta, and you don't necessarily get ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, gentlemen, I enjoyed that thoroughly. That was fun listening to you two, and I hope it brought back some very fond memories for both of you, and appreciate your time for coming on, and maybe we'll get you back on. I know, Andy, you're heavily still involved in the class, and Terry, you're still a young man, so there's room at the top.
Terry,
Right.
Masters Worlds in Mexico in May. You up for it?
I was talking to Rob about it 2 days ago. Maybe.
Come
We'll
on,
see.
come
I
on.
gotta get a hiking bench.
40th year reunion.
There you go.
Okay, well, thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate your time, and you guys have a good night. Stay
Thanks,
warm.
Mike.
Thanks.